Hello, 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 and welcome everyone to this week's live stream Q&A. Happy New Year to you all. I hope you had a good holiday. I know I did. Change of plans, but it was pretty good. I am your New Year new host, Mod Sarnie, and I'm joined by the wonderful Arcane, Bruno, Husky, and Kieren for a very special Nex-Focused Q&A. How are you all doing? We'll start with you, Arcane. How was your holidays? How are things going?
A bunch of people got COVID, so that explains Christmas. But yeah, it was still nice to see people. I just walked here in the rain. That's why I look all raggedy. Not great. I don't have any tea bags. I've run out, so I'm stressed. Typical British problems. But otherwise, I'm doing really good. I'm really excited by the launch and the positivity around it. There was only a couple of complaints about group sizing and things like that we really need to address.
Oh, good stuff. Do you not have a special stash of tea bags, like just in case of emergencies? I thought everyone.
Yeah, I do. I've gone through them. Yeah.
Oh, damn.
I'm
okay.
a failure of a British person.
Yeah, disappointment. Good stuff though. Bruno, how are you doing?
I'm doing a lot better now. Like Arcane said, a few people got COVID, me included. But I've recovered. I'm feeling fine. There's a lingering cough, so if I mute every so often, you know why. But yeah, it's been good.
I feel like Husky is laughing at the same reason I am. Chat is going mad.
Chat is just spamming cough, 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 cough.
Not because of Nex, no. But
no.
Careful
Couldn't be
there.
possibly because of Nex. No way. That's good to hear, Bruno. That's good to hear. Husky, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I didn't catch COVID, but I think like most people, plans were slightly affected in some way. I think we had New Year plans, and it was a family member of friends we were going to visit that caught it, so we were like, oh, okay, we're just going to stay back instead. But it was good. Got some gaming sessions in. Got a nice break, which doesn't happen often. And even though I didn't take as long a break as other people, just there's like this time in the office where not in the office, but just working, where nobody really expects much. It's just a good time to catch up, write some documentation. You don't have all these pressing meetings the same, and it's just some good time to get some nice clear thought processes. So yeah,
Good stuff. Yeah, I was surprised. The first sort of few waves of COVID, I knew no one that caught it, but yet this last sort of month, like 7 members of my family, and I'm like, oh, okay. It's very, very strange. And finally, Kieren, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. It's been an absolute blast sort of seeing Nex come out and the madness of the masses that ensued yesterday. And, the whole cough thing, kind of ironic timing, unfortunately. But it was original Nex design. I think we did have some conversations about it's kind of awkward including a cough mechanic in the minute. But hey, the memes have delivered, so underlying this is not that we want to joke about the pandemic. Like it's not a joking matter, but hey ho.
Indeed. Speaking of Nex, I'm just going to open this up to the floor. How do you guys think the launch has gone then?
Yeah, really good. Every world was full pretty much yesterday. Starting to die off a little bit, but most worlds are still pretty hard to get into. Kind of suffering from success in that regard. Like everyone wants in, people just spamming on the door. Obviously, we're going to look into it because we want as many people to be able to engage with the content as possible in the most ideal way possible. But it's definitely not a bad thing that so many people are doing the content.
yeah. Got a lot more positive feedback generally. I think people are comparing this to Nightmare a lot. They're both group bosses. How they both have things in the corners you need to kill at certain times of the fight. But it seems a lot of people are liking the way Nex works a lot more. I think there's a lot more actually engaging mechanics. And I think that's also the reason why so many people have sort of requested that we bring it back, right? Because it was a memorable piece of content and it did stick out as being good. It's also been fun watching Wooks' attempts to solo it. I wonder if he'll actually get there. It's a little bit of a bullies you with stats fight, but hey, that's just how it is, right? And maybe there'll be, ways to further mitigate damage and stuff that are discovered,
Yeah, it was very, very
Have we
insane.
revealed how many kills have happened?
Not yet. I've got the number of players in front of me in my little announcement. Kieren, so I'll read that out in a second. But yeah, it was quite interesting in the update call that we have. A lot of us had sort of Twitch open on the side and watching a couple of streamers do it and going at first. It was good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Awesome. All right. With that said, I will go through the announcements and then we can crack on with this Q&A. So there's only 2 announcements today. So the first one is ! Game update. Nex is out, if you hadn't already guessed. And in just the first day, a whopping 28k of you have taken down Nex. Massive amount, which is crazy. We've been reading your feedback since Nex was released and have made some tweaks that are now live. You can check out the full list of changes at the top of yesterday's news post and make sure to give us your feedback. And ! Poll. There is a poll happening right now, launched a couple of hours ago, so do not miss out on your chance to vote. You can have your say on a plethora of content, including Tombs of a Massacre, Land of the Goblins, Group Iron Man, and more. So make sure to visit your nearest in-game poll booth or vote through the account settings menu. Awesome. So we have specific questions we've gathered for the Q&A that relate to the changes we've already made or could make that we've just previously spoke about. So we're going to go over them first, just for the benefit of anyone who hasn't checked the latest news post. And then we'll carry on with some general Nex and more questions. So first question we have is from RJM 0007. Any possibilities of adding a group clan instance similar to the Corporeal Beast for Nex? Would be nice to just do it with the clan and not 80 random people.
In short, this is something we want to do. It's just not something we want to throw in the game willy-nilly without really kind of throwing it by you guys. We want a bit of feedback. I put it in the blog earlier, just throwing the idea out there. The current design is players that can create the private instance with the hard plus tier of combat achievements. We would basically add an option that you'd be able to join those players' instances, assuming you're friends, similar to POH. So if they're either their friends' chat is on all, so they can see everyone, public or whatever it's called, or if you've got each other added and they're set into friends, people can effectively create their own instances then. So it's still gated behind content, it's still gated behind a fee of sorts, but we think it's more than reasonable considering in big groups you can stay there for quite a while.
I also think in playing devil's advocate... Oh, sorry.
Go on, Husky. Go on.
I say, playing devil's advocate on the decision as well, there is still discussion and things from players. Like, I've seen people bring up like the price of the uniques, you know, the fact that it's expected to be busy and maybe it'll be better in a couple of weeks' time. And I know Arcane and I were speaking about it, and he kind of said, like, well, do you want to have people wait 2 weeks to actually get to enjoy the content, right? You know, isn't really all that good. Maybe there's a middle ground. Like, I think I pitched the idea of, like, maybe capping it to, like, 3 or 4 private instances per world or something, you know, where there's still some kind of upper limit. But, I mean, that's kind of why it's all out there for the community. It's kind of interesting to see what comes up from that discussion, and, you know, I'm sure we'll all go over that at some point before the actual decision is made.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that if, let's say in 2 weeks' time, this isn't a problem, well, if we have instances in the game, they won't be used then either. Because, well, not to a massive extent anyway, because if you could get a world for free, why would you go and use the instance? I think the main gain out of this is everyone's really excited about Nex right now. And sure, you can enjoy it, but you get to a point where you've done 6 hours of coughing in a 50-man mass, and you want to be able to play it with your team properly. That's started to happen. We've seen a little bit of that, especially overnight and so on. I don't want to kill the hype. I want to have the ability for people to go and fight Nex properly. This is not to say we are going to ignore the impact on how many of the items of like Torva are coming into game. This is something we'll pay attention to. If that becomes a problem and sort of we're not seeing the right rates that we want to see, the supply is outstripping demand and the prices are really low, we're not going to not act. We will make a change and go from there. I expect this would be, it's going to allow people to play Nex who want to play it now, the next few weeks particularly, and that's what I want to do with this. So I've seen some questions pop in the chat, like, are you going to take weeks to act on this feedback? Like, if the general consensus is like people are keen on this kind of thing, we want to act basically as soon as possible.
I guess if we do have far too many come into the game as well, we can just turn up the item deletion machine on the GE, you know, if we wanted to. That's been quite a fun thing to watch as well over the few weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be. We're going to keep a very close eye on Nex over the next couple of, like we already have. Even yesterday, there was so much feedback we gathered, and you can see how quickly like the teams were discussing everything. And even just today, we've put out that updated blog. So we will be keeping an eye on it. And just as a note for anyone who hasn't read it, it's now 60 players, not 80. So groups are maxed out at 60 instead. Cool. So the next question we have is from Len Logic. Can we extend private instances to other God Wars bosses or other bosses in general? Locking it behind Combat Diary with higher tiers equals more players can join.
I think we want to take a bit of a look at combat achievements as a whole, the rewards, etc., and see if there's any changes we want to make, especially with Nex being added to combat achievements and obviously more content over time. I think it's fine to revisit the rewards, change them, make them stronger here and there where appropriate. This would definitely be something maybe in whole 76, maybe 77. It just depends on time, etc. But it's something we're interested in, especially if you guys are.
Especially
the thing I don't like about...
We keep doing this, don't we? I was going to say that every boss will bring out like anywhere from 5 to 15 new achievements. A raid will be way more, so... I think looking at those rewards, especially because the current perception is they're underwhelming as a whole, even if they're prestigious, I think that's something we definitely want to look at.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the element about instances is like crashing isn't fun, but at Nex it can be a problem, maybe even more so than the other bosses. In that somebody can come and get the coffin, scupper your team up, right? If you're a private team and some random just turns up to your world, you can't really do much about it, and it could be at the detriment of your team, right? It could hit Nex when she's healing, all these other things. So it does put a little bit of more importance on this, I think. To the second point about combat achievements and reviewing the rewards, that sounds good. There was a separate sort of discussion I wanted to bring up on that topic, and I'm very curious what you and Arcane Husky think particularly as well. But the idea of whether rewards unlocked, I think we had this discussion very early on with combat achievements coming out, like whether the reward unlocks could be made points based, like the league system was, in that to unlock the hard tier rewards, you don't necessarily have to do all of the tasks up to that tier. Instead, you could maybe do some of the higher tier rewards, and as long as you accrue the points. But yeah, I just wondered what people thought of that as a sort of way of doing it.
I think if we were going to do that, Grandmaster would still require everything to actually be a Grandmaster of combat, right? So it'd still require a total.
The top one would have to, right? That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm interested in the idea. It is a bit of a big rewrite.
The other thing to consider as well is that the amount of points required will have to go up every time we add more, right? Like, are the points based on you need X percentage of the total points? I've seen like other mixed combinations where maybe Grandmaster ones don't count towards completing hard, right? But you need X percentage of ones in the hard diary. So like maybe when you get like 30% through the hard ones, you get a lamp. You get like 50% through. You get the crossbow. But maybe we add a few more in the middle, and then when you complete 100% of the hard,
absolutely,
you get the offhand and stuff. That gets kind of messy though, especially like, do you still then require hard completion for elite completion and stuff?
Yeah, the way I was thinking of it, if you just super simplify it, like, tier 1 gives you 1 point a task, tier 2 gives you 5 points a task, right? Something like that. And then if you add up all of the tasks up to hard, that's the amount of points you need. So you could then say, I'm going to miss out a couple of hard tasks and do that next tier up. That gives me 100 points a task, and I can skip a few. So, but you're still right. You could absolutely still say there's a minimum threshold that you have to have at least done 80% of them, for instance. But the idea that someone's done an even more challenging task probably means they deserve it. I think that's probably worth, a good consideration. Either way, it seems like this sparked a pretty decent discussion in chat, but we talked briefly about, like, sort of making this stuff more rewarding, and that might be a way to look at it. Even as you say, I think even like if you unlock some of it as you go, so there's more unlocks. Sounds good as well.
The other thing to consider, and maybe it's not a concern because the tiers already do that, but the whole idea of combat achievements was always like this. It gives you a ladder into getting good at PvM. If you start at the bottom and work your way up to completing gradually more difficult tasks through the tiers, you'll eventually, be pretty damn good at the game, especially if you get to Grandmaster. But maybe even if you just get to, I finished Elite, and that's pretty impressive. I wonder if the free sort of picking and like people going, I need to go for this 6-point Grandmaster compared to this 3-point hard, just like super overcomplicates the system. Even if it is opening up like the versatility. I definitely agree with the stuff that Arcane said though, right? Like if you want that Zuck helm, like you have to zuck it up and complete them all and beat all the Inferno and the hard top times. Although I have seen a lot of feedback that some of the top times might be too difficult compared to the other time tasks, and that's what when we look at the rewards and stuff, I know there's a lot of achievements people want us to look at as a whole, whether it's KC, some of the skilling boss ones that are on there are quite contentious as well. So yeah.
Yeah, what I imagine is you sort of have a big progress bar, and you obviously have the markers that you're aiming for. When we add new tasks, the point thresholds would change. If you go below that threshold, you've got to get back over that threshold. The same way, essentially, that we work now, just with a specific set of tasks. Anyway, that's a discussion I almost ran out of time. Sorry for the derail.
No, it's an interesting discussion to have, and I think it's probably going to carry on after this live stream and within the teams itself. It's definitely one to have. I think the chat, it seems like a lot of people are on board with some change in that direction, so looks like a good direction to head. So yeah, but we'll keep you updated if any more discussions happen, of course. So the next related question we have is from Melee Moore. Have you considered lowering the amount of supplies dropped? Right now it seems way too easy to get supplies even if it's a mass. Also, was it intentional that it would be very easy to stay at Nex indefinitely? The amount of prayer pots and food dropping on average, and the fact that resupplying and re-entering is so easy as well.
No, this was somewhat of an oversight of how easy it is to stay in that room forever with the supplies dropped. You get a supply drop like maybe every second kill or something like that, and the fact you're using like one prayer pot a kill at the moment in the big groups, which is obviously many, you're profiting supplies. We have hotfixed that today, so the minimum amount of supplies you get has gone down from I think 4 brews 2 restores to 2 brew 1 restore. Just significantly reducing that all just because it's unnecessary. You'll still get higher amounts in lower scales, but for the massive groups, you're not just profiting brews and restores all the time. Bosses are supposed to drain supplies, not generate them. So we've changed that. We also reduced it to 60 from 80, so generally you'll use a bit more supplies. We've changed a couple of the mechanics here and there, so the boss will be a little less predictable, a bit more engaging. So again, that should generally use more supplies. Obviously, the lower groups you do, the more supplies you're going to use. Once you start getting away from those 60-man masses constantly.
Yeah, and I think that's... I saw someone in chat say, like, how could you not do that, right? I mean, we did a ton of balancing for Nex, and we got it really good. We did a lot of, like, 3-4 man group sizes, 8-10. We don't have 80 people on the old school team to jump in and see how it feels. So it's always just kind of speculation on that part. I don't think we were too far off, and I think that there was one thing on the blog about, like, Nex will now target more people, and I think that was part of the concern was every time she attacked, I think she was only hitting, like, 3 out of 8 people in the room because we were cautious about how much code we were running all at once. I think that's been increased now. There's just lots of little balancing and stuff where, if you were in those smaller groups of say 20 to 30, you really would have noticed your supply drain a lot more, right? Theoretically, right? Right, because I say that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to keep iterating, right?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it'll be a constant, especially in these next 2 weeks. Like we said, it's going to be keep a low ear to the ground and see what's happening and tweaks and that. So yeah, awesome. The Abyss OSRS. Is it possible to increase the drop rate of the Nahil shards on the monsters where you get a kill count? As an Iron Man, I have to gather 250 shards. The current rate to get them is just absurd. And then they put in brackets, it will take about 100 hours of Nex masses to collect 250 shards. That's extremely excessive.
The shard's pretty much only use is for the crossbow right now. It's that and the potion's not going to have really high demand. So I think it's fine. You got very, very lucky. Congratulations. I guess this is your punishment for getting lucky, having to do the content more to make your crossbow. If you start doing it in smaller groups, I think you'll find that you'll probably end up getting more now shards. It's just because it's trying to divide it amongst all the players. You're usually just getting one.
Awesome. Thank you, Arcane. The next question we have is from Captain Ali. Why is the default G price of the Nihil? Is that how you pronounce it?
Sure.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I'll go with that. 150k. Yet the price of the blood essence is at 2 mil. It seemed incorrect.
That's been changed now. I got it fixed.
There you go. Easy peasy. The next question we have is from Tube Alloy's Evil Twin. There seems to be an awful lot of blood essence drops. Like, if one person gets blood essence in my clan, everyone in the party all seems to. Is this intentional?
So when Nex does loot, she'll pick 2 items and then effectively roll for that item and then divide it amongst the group. For blood essence, you can't get less than 1 blood essence, so everyone will just get 1. It's a fairly rare drop, so that's one of the general standard loot table drops that is fairly high value, that scales up pretty well in masses. But yeah, it's fairly rare.
Cool. We've only got 2 more regarding the recent hotfixes. So this next one, can you come up with an alternative solution for DCs at Nex? Currently, if you DC and manage to survive, you get kicked directly out the door into range of hard-hitting mobs. If you don't have enough KC, an ancient item, or telly out, you're screwed. Simply teleporting just inside the frozen door will make no difference to essence mechanics. It will put you somewhere safe.
That's also been hotfixed and done. If you log out in the room, either in the prison itself or the boss room, but not the bank room, if you log out in any of those places, you'll now log in a safe area, like where the frozen door is.
I think it's always interesting reading stuff like this as well, because the player literally in their question suggested 3 solutions to their own problem. Either have a Zara item equipped, either make sure you have enough KC to re-enter if need be, or make sure that you have a teleport on you. I mean, I know that it's not ideal, and I don't think throwing people into aggressive mobs is necessarily the best solution after a DC, especially because DCs are sudden and unexpected, but it is like there are other solutions, right?
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. So the final question we have is from Halula123. When the hype of Nex dies down, will her mechanic be tweaked again? People complain about how easy the boss is, but that's just a factor of 70 to 80 people killing her at one time. If you make it so she doesn't drop as many supply drops, and you buff her SS delay.
The changes that we're making are in consideration of the whole small scale as well. Was that Bruno?
Yeah, I think we mainly bounce around small teams anyway, so I don't see us changing too much if we've already balanced for those size teams. But yeah, like we said, it's already 60 rather than 70 to 80, so that already helps.
And that was a part of when we did a lot of playtesting in smaller groups. That was actually kind of a lot of our thinking was we need to be in here long enough and to get enough kills and to try and get our supplies right so that we would have the 40 to re-enter and hopefully have that sort of permanent cycle. In masses, that's kind of free. You know, you're literally using next to no supplies and getting infinite. But in smaller groups, like if you get like say 4 or 5 man teams killing her, you know, you're really thinking about like which piece of gear you want to bring, or like maybe having like gear on you at least to maybe get a couple like extra kills or KCs to get back in. That was a lot of what we sort of tested and trying to make sure that felt good and that you weren't just, you know, screwed over if you were at like 30 KC and couldn't get back in.
Awesome stuff. So we've got a couple of questions regarding loot and drop tables. First one is from Shady Sir. I don't get how the drop system works. Is only the MVP of each killable to get the unique, or is it randomly rolled for everyone that's done damage to her? Is loot scaling to team size? If so, why?
I don't really like divulging drop mechanics where necessary, but generally everyone will have somewhat of a chance depending on your contribution, similar to most content in the game. Similar to Nightmare, similar to Chambers of Xeric, the more you contribute, the higher chance you've got of getting unique. It's not just in the MVP.
And along with that question, Gentle Satanist asked, any plans to make any other bosses work similar to Nex in terms of loot distribution?
No, I don't like how Nex does loot. I don't like how Nightmare does loot. It's like that because it's necessary. It's not necessary for regular God Wars bosses. It's not necessary for Corp. Simply from the fact that they're kind of soloable. It kind of is the Iron Man game mode making impact on the game, and that's just the truth of it, right? I know there was obviously sayings like, oh, you won't make changes because of the Iron Man game mode, etc., but it's a large portion of the player base. I think that isn't something that we should have said back then, and we kind of need to take everyone into consideration and make things possible. This is an unboostable system, and that's good, and that makes sense, and everyone can contribute and get their fair share of stuff. If it's ever boostable, that's a problem for Iron Man, and we need to come up with a system for that. I think it's fine as is. I think it's okay, but I wouldn't want to go and change other systems for the sake of it. I do prefer, where possible, the core God War style system where just the MVP gets the chance. But obviously for Iron Man group content, that doesn't work. So that only really works if the boss is soloable, and Nex isn't soloable. Or so far. But realistically, no.
That's your Wooks.
The other thing I'd like to add to this is, like, in terms of how it works, I don't really like the way it drops the items on the floor, like under the players and stuff. I always like the idea of like one big drop drops under Nex, and it's like that's exciting. But regardless, we are learning. We are thinking. This is something we are thinking about. Obviously, we've learned from Nightmare. I think, I think we all acknowledge we got Nightmare slightly wrong in terms of the drop table, and hopefully this one is better. So, in terms of how we're handling it, at least. But even in terms of how we're handling it, as I say, conversations we are having should hopefully mean next time we do a group boss, like we have a better solution for how to do it. Obviously, raids kind of work in a slightly different way in that you get your loot in a chest and things, but they still have like contribution systems and stuff going on too.
Yeah, we've got a lot of systems now for how to distribute loot over group content. I think they're all kind of slightly different, and we're all trying to test different things, see which work. Some work differently for different content, I think the whole item deletion thing with lots of items in a space, that's also something that was a big factor, say, with the loot appearing under players, and that is something the engine at least are looking into, I believe. I think they're looking at being able to identify the player more readily, if you know what I mean. So the game world knows the player. It's kind of weird, right? Because you'd think that's how it was already, but it's not quite that way. It's just, yeah. And I think that's I think that was part of the sort of work to look into. Could Ultimate Iron Man have their items on like a loot pile on the ground, and be able to like access another world to get their death pile, not the loot pile, be able to hop another world to get it, so it's not like lost on a server reboot and stuff. So hopefully that'll have other implications like this to the rest of the game, so we can just have everyone rush to the center to collect their massive, loot pile. Massive loot pile of 4 rubies and 3 air orbs in mass, but
Awesome, thank you for that, guys. We've got a couple of questions regarding new designs. First one from Belle Delphine. Crossbows were said to be Nex's weakness, yet it feels like everyone at Nex is using the Twisted Bow, Bowfar, and Dark Bow. The Zarak crossbow feels underwhelming because of this, and so does Armadillo crossbow. What are the team's thoughts on how the Zarak crossbow is stacking up?
I think this is another issue with masses. I'll take this one. I think it's another thing with masses where, like, if you don't take much damage, then you don't really need to eat much, which means that you can spend more time just T-bowing Nex. But in a smaller group, I do think that you'll spend more time eating if you do have a Twisted Bow, because you obviously got no shield, and because of that, you won't be doing as much DPS. So in small groups, I do think it has more of a clear difference as to why a shield is better.
Yeah, my opinion on this is crossbows were never really said to be the weakness, but so it's not like there's this like artificial way that crossbows are just amazing or anything like that. But the encounter has been designed in a way where defense does matter. to like a more of a degree than normal content because of the fact of like trips and things like that. The fact that the boss does a lot of damage. Mathematically, obviously, Monster Examine has been disabled, so you guys can't figure it out and do the math. There is stuff there. Twisted Boat isn't the best for various different reasons. Obviously, you can't do the math or anything right now. But once actually people can start engaging with the content properly in lower scales, people start to discover different metas. Just because you see everyone T-bowing in Ancestral and stuff like that doesn't mean Twisted Boat is the best weapon. It's not that simple. A lot of the weapons are fairly close.
And that's the thing as well, right? Like people are using this sort of, there was the whole memes with the Twisted Bow and Ancestral, and it's literally like Ancestral like 1 or 2 accuracy points higher, and that makes a lot of sense because of the whole people figuring out the cough mechanic, but also as we kind of said, Nex is only hitting like 30 players out of 80, or was on launch, so you literally are not caring about your defense. When she's hitting more people, you're going to consider, you know, the fact that she drains prayer when she hits you. Like a Spectral's really going to help with that, or an Ellie's going to reduce the damage I take. And we were really, really feeling the benefit of those 2 shields. Also, a lot of people haven't got to the point of using a Zaurite crossbow yet. And as Arcane said, you know, even like T-bow is not best in slot, but even if, for example, people are like, it's better, like it sims better than, and that means that shield flicking's a thing. People just aren't going to shield flick a lot of people. Some people will, right? And that's fine if you're shield flicking. It's also awkward because Nex attacks at 4 cycles versus the T-bow being 5, so you've kind of got that awkwardness. I think Bofa kind of doesn't have that same issue. Naturally, it's being a faster weapon, but you know, there's more to it when it comes into it. People look at this as, this does the most damage, but in a longer fight, taking less damage is sometimes important. Like we said, there were a lot of times where we tried like T-bow runs and we just weren't quite getting to that like enough KC for like infinite kills and stuff, you know, and obviously some of our players could be better, and you know, sometimes like I think as well for like some accounts, like it's kind of like where dragon arrows aren't always best in a lot of places. Like you might just use a ton more supplies, like chugging brews and restores, where you're like, if I'm doing this, I'm getting this many kills, like maybe get an extra kill an hour, but I'm spending so much more on supplies, you know, and like players will eventually get to the math, and they might end up coming round and saying, you know, 2 months later, Jagex, you're wrong, see? We said it all along. Like, Twisted Bow is best in slot, and it's better for these reasons, and as metas evolve, sure, that's fine. But crossbows are pretty damn good and pretty close. And, like, in terms of DPS as well. So I think that's where that came from. And also as far as, like, what people should panic buy and all this stuff beforehand, like, the majority of people are going to be using a crossbow versus Nex, right? Especially in that mass situations when everyone's trying out the content, you know? And, like, even on top of that, like, we kind of found that the Twisted Bow was pretty good in testing, but, like, especially in masses, like, the potential for 100 Ruby Bolt procs to, like, skyrocket your contribution high enough, and it's kind of like why they're good at Corp. I think that's also kind of a fact, so... It's a complicated discussion, is what that comes down to. But people, I think there's a lot of people just going, "Hey, Wook said T-bow's good," and haven't really looked into it.
Just be patient. The meta will evolve. It's not like day one defines Nex as a whole, right?
And what people are saying is true as well. T-bow being like a 800 mil to 1 bill item, whatever it sits at, given market and stuff, that thing being good at Nex isn't a bad thing either, right? You know,
what's meta in a mass is going to be always different to meta in a 5-6 man team as well. So, you know, there's not been much of that because all the worlds have been packed full of masses. So we'll see what happens. Like, as with every boss, it'll all work out what's best as we go.
Yeah, like an example right now is the minions. You barely get a chance to get maybe 1 or 2 bolts in there if it's a mass, but in a small team, those minions stay up for a good, like, few seconds at least. So and the meta for those minions isn't even to use a crossbow because crossbows are pretty slow with those minions. So yeah, the meta is definitely not set. It's way too early to just think that those are the metas because you can do it in a 60-man team.
Yeah. The other thing as well is I think people are making a lot of assumptions based on the stats that she had back in the day. She doesn't have the same stats. You know, we had to, and I think I saw things like why it takes so long, just copy paste content. We did a lot of like looking in DPS calculations, trying to rebalance the content, make it right for old school. You know, there's a lot more to it than that. I think I've seen a lot of controversy around the hiding monster exam and stuff. I think my opinion on that was just, it's interesting. I'm for seeing how that plays out. I don't really know if I like it or don't like it. I think it certainly makes it more fun on hype day. I don't think, like, in terms of people guessing and trying out weapons and figuring out stuff and not just 30 minutes in, somebody's run the math, right? But
yeah, I'm excited when we get some more smaller teams going at it, because it's gonna be interesting, and people are probably gonna be, I wouldn't say shocked, but they're gonna be surprised, more likely, what they're coming up against. Cool. So the next question is from Captain Alpha Walrus. In her final phase, Nex uses ancient curses. Could there be a chance for the prayer book to come to old school in the future?
Maybe.
It's not impossible. I've also seen a lot of people think that because Nex uses these prayers that they're available to players. That's definitely not the case. It's just that Nex has those prayers coded into it. There's no like secret prayer book we're hiding from you guys like there is spell books.
I'm just gonna say this right now because there's a lot of like no's in chat. We're not getting old soul split. That will never happen. That's the most broken shit ever. We're not having that.
yeah, I think
Alright,
that
just-
people go like people get so worked up on the whole like curses thing because of how they were, and just like Nex, when we backport it for this, there's nothing to say we can't look at the old curses and go, these ones were really good, these ones were busted and we're not keeping, these ones were underwhelming and we'd want to change, and make them fit for the game. I think just the concept of a new prayer book is quite exciting, right? You know, the idea that you won't have access to protect from melee magic and range because they're so dominant in a lot of our metas. It's just that we are definitely, like, I know we went a tier up with Torva, but we're still predominantly a horizontal progression game, right? You know, where we want this very slow sort of power creep, but like, you know, you've still got options available and stuff. And I think that's good for a lot of reasons. I don't have time to tangent on in the Q&A right now, but you know, if we have another, just if people said another prayer book, ooh, that's interesting. But as soon as you attach the word curses to it, just because that's what people associate with, it's like this thing in their head of just it's going to be bad without even considering what it could be. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
The prayer as a skill is severely lacking beyond 77, except for more prayer points. So the skill has room to do something with it. I don't know if we know what in terms of what prayers could be. It could be still something inspired by curses, perhaps. But either way, I'd be very, very, very interested to see some player suggestions on what prayers could do and what you'd like to see. I've had a few ideas float around my head in the past, like what if we had another prayer book, but on that prayer book you couldn't flick prayers or something, so you could do something different with them then, because you know players can't like swap between them so quickly. That might change the system and how we think about prayers. There's all sorts of things you could do. So yeah, take this as a chance to say, well, what would you do with a new prayer book? And tell us. I'd love to see some pictures for it.
Yeah, I'm going to tangent a little bit. Would you guys want to see something like that come into the game, or want to work on something like that for an old school version?
I'd love to try it. Whether we end up designing one that the players like is a different question, but I'd like to at least try. Could be interesting.
Yeah, very, very. It's a very mixed message in chat. Like, very, very mixed. So it'd be interesting if that was ever a thing. Cool.
I genuinely wonder how much of it is, I really, really, really hate curses, no to them being in the game, versus I never, ever, ever want there to be another prayer book, no matter what's in it. Like, even if like there's not a single thing that relates to how curses used to be and that kind of thing. It reminds me of like the skill discussions we have, where some people are like, no, I don't want dungeoneering, or I don't want warding and stuff, but like, would they be okay with a new skill, period? Right? Like, doesn't matter what it is, you know? But
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's always an interesting question with the community. Skills in general, very, very interesting. Cool. The next one is from GladAd6546. What is the reason Nex is unscaled? How do you feel about people achieving 500 KC on the day of release?
I think this is really interesting. Because Nightmare scaled, right? And no one complained about the boss fight. So obviously, you get the full experience of the boss fight, right? It scales, so then you experience the full 5-minute intended adventure. Then when you actually get into the math of it, it was just so incredibly inefficient to kill the boss in mass, where any scale above 5 was technically bad. And even changes to the drop table that we tried to do to alleviate that, it's just nowhere near close enough. So then it was just completely dead content. And now we have the other side of it, where it pretty much doesn't scale at all, stats-wise. And the boss just dies like that. Similar to Corpse, similar to every other God Wars boss. Mathematically, this is a lot better, because you have an actual decent chance of the drop per hour. So it's not completely dead content. But then the actual intended adventure, you don't really experience it, right? So it's two sides of the coin. It's kind of one of these options, or the one in the middle, which is, imagine it's scaled like Nightmare, but then the drop rate scaled up with it. And if you wanted to technically make an 80-man Nightmare as efficient as a 5-man Nightmare, I think it was something like the uniques would have to be a 1 in 10. Which just feels so wrong.
I think it was
it's
lower.
so unnatural.
I think it was 1 in
every 10 kills. Yeah, unique. It's just not even rare at all. And I know people are oh, next uniques aren't rare because we're getting 35 kills an hour and there's 80 people in the room. But realistically, it's just a static rate. And yeah, you kill a boss faster, you get more of them. That makes sense. It feels right into RuneScape. So, I don't know. Personally, I think it's fine as is. I think it's fine that masses are a bit janky and stupid and the boss just dies immediately. I think that's just kind of what mass content is in RuneScape. I think the only problem is that you're forced to do mass content right now, and there is no alternative.
Yeah, I love it. And this is the thing. Reality doesn't mean we have to have this or the other, right? We can have Nightmare exist as it is and Nex in the same game. I like that there's variety. I like that there's bosses you can do in a mass, and sure, it means if you're a lower level player, you don't have the best equipment, you can still play it. Yes, you need a bigger team. 10-man, 15, 20-person team. But you can do it. It's fun. It gives you a completely different experience. I think it does get to the point where it's a bit silly at 40, 50, 60 people, right? That's crazy talk at that point, right? Madness happens and ensues, and you've all seen it. But the idea that you could take on a boss, kill it faster, have an easier time because you take more people, it actually it's almost self-balancing, right? Because you're going to, in theory, if you were sharing the loot, you're splitting between a lot more people. There's an incentive to go with smaller teams and pull it off because of that. So I think it works. It's kind of old school, as Arcane says, right? Corp works like that. The other God Wars bosses work like that. There's room for both in this game. Some bosses you want to scale and have smarter stuff happen, and indeed we've seen that with some of the stuff we've done. But it's contextual. It probably depends on the boss and what we're trying to do with it. It does get more complicated the more mechanics you have. Some scale better. Nex's shadow phase attack, she puts the shadow spots under you. It's very easy to apply that to everybody. Some mechanics work better when you've got a more specific size team and you need to consider that more properly.
I mean, the cough mechanic isn't really a concern in smaller teams, right? You just don't stack. Maybe 2 people catch it if you're close to Nex in melee range or something, and you just coordinate with
you
those
say
people.
that. The amount of playtests where, I swear, you ran over with the cough and infectors us all. I'm not so sure it's easy to deal with in 5 man.
Hey, Nex is a small hitbox, and I'm approaching I'm approaching dad gamer status. I'm turning 30 this year. I don't have the clicks I had when I was a kid.
But yes, you're right. Right, it's an easier mechanic to deal with in a smaller team.
I don't think any of us have Husky. I think we're all getting to that stage now. So it's fine. You're not alone. Next one is from Boss High Scores. Why did you decide to not let the ancient ceremonial robes skip KC? Is there a chance this will be changed in the future?
I'd take this one.
Sure.
We had a lot of conversation around this, right? You've seen the solution now in that we've got the altar. It's sort of to reduce the loop, so you can teleport out, maybe top up your kill count, maybe you already have 40, you can get back to the bank. That obviously wasn't what was there in original. To give context to anybody who doesn't know, in the original launch of Nex, like January 2011 or whenever it was, Nex came out and had a 40 kill count requirement. It didn't work like ours, so you had to give 40 actual kills to get into the room, and you had to deal with that. The boss was then very difficult, right? You were in, especially in small man teams, it was very, very challenging. You wouldn't last long, and so you'd spend most of your time just getting kill count. RuneScape in 2011 then changed it a few weeks later to change how Ancient Ceremonial worked. So if you put on the full Ancient Ceremonial set, you didn't need 40 kill count. You could just walk through the door and skip it altogether. Now, that was a solution that almost, came about because of the fact they were already out. They had to come up with a change that could be done in that way. We had a chance to review it and say, well, how do we want it to work for old school? What's right and what's balancing that doesn't sort of just completely remove the mechanic of kill count, right? That room I wanted to have a purpose. We didn't want it to just be completely skipped. At the same time, we wanted it to be balanced right so that you could approach it. So I think some really smart stuff went into that, like the change the guys made to kill count. This notion of essence instead, so that you could do more than one per kill, made it a lot easier to make a kill count against high-level monsters. And then in the end, we came up with the altar thing to add to that and reduce that loop. And I think, right now, you've seen it mentioned earlier, the stream, right, in masses, the balancing's trivial, right? It's easy to come back, and you're always going to have that kill count. It's free. Once we get down to proper sort of team sizes and the hype's died down a little bit, I think you'll see that actually the balancing of it is actually really quite good. At least I hope so. But I really like the system we've got in. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think this is a nicer system that gives purpose to each element of the next release as a whole.
Downtime's important. Like, it's not good gameplay that you can just stay at a boss forever without any thought. Obviously, with masses, it almost is that. But once you start getting into the lower scale groups, there is going to be thought in like how much KC and supplies you bring with you. Do you get extra KC beforehand so then you can teleport out a bit sooner? Do you just farm up a bunch of KC so you can just sit there forever? And there's actual considerations there instead of just skipping the mechanic completely. I think it's in a good place.
Yeah, thank you, mods Arcane and Kieren, and thank you to mod Husky. He's had to dip just before the end of the stream, but yeah, it's been a pleasure having him on as always. So I'm sure you'll see him in another one very, very soon. So we haven't got long left, so I'll try and get through as many of these as possible. The next question we have is, will combat achievements be added for Nex?
Quick answer to this. For any new bosses we'll be having, we won't ever release a new boss with combat achievements because that feels like a bit of a silly thing to do. Just in case anything goes wrong with the boss or while people figure out the boss itself. Combat achievements will always come a few weeks after the release of the boss, once things are settled down. So that was the way for the Zannia's Nightmare, it will be like that for Nex, and it will be like that for Tomb of Mascot.
Thank you, Bruno. The last question we have on the new designs is, would it be possible to add a Group Iron Man only room to Nex, so you're not forced to abort the kill to prevent the loss of prestige if someone crashes you?
I think the private instances that we're talking about would accomplish the same thing.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Arcane. So just a couple of other next questions before we have to wrap up. From Sasuke, will Torva get a set effect in the future?
No, the plans. It almost debatably has a set effect right now, because I think at Chambers of Xeric, you gain 2 or 3 max hit with Dragon Hunter lands in max melee if you've got the helmet on, but if you don't have the helmet on, you don't gain any max hits because of how broken our math is in the game. because we always round down, so they puts you over a threshold and the multipliers kick in and you get a bunch of max hits. So technically the helmet is really necessary right now. But no like additional set effect, no.
Awesome, thank you. The next question we have is, can you make the next bank NPC more visible and not move?
If this is a common issue, this is the first time I've heard of this.
Feels like a bit of a non-issue. We could. Whether it's needed, I don't really know. Maybe it's because there's just like 10 people in the holding room. So I might get a bit confused.
Maybe it's just a moving thing.
Yeah, does she appear on top?
I assume so. I haven't actually checked, but I think the moving thing is probably the most... I mean, that's what chat's just screaming about now. So yeah, it must be an issue.
Yeah. Let's make sure she
Seems
appears on top
reasonable.
of players and stop her moving, and I think it'd be fine.
Yeah.
Easy.
Kieren, I think that's a bit of a forward question to ask.
So the next question we have is, does Blood Essence just give extra runes like the Diary Reward, or does it give extra experience for those runes as well?
No extra XP, so you'll use it if you're okay at like sacrificing a bit of XP per hour for higher GP per hour. That's kind of the deal.
Awesome. From Caneland 96, what are ecumenical key shards and where do you get them? Are they a replacement for getting full keys at the Wildy God Wars dungeon, or are they dropped by minions in the ancient prison?
They are only dropped by Nex in fairly low quantities, fairly rare. They are a replacement to getting full keys, so you could theoretically do like thousands of Nex KC and stack up a bunch of these shards before doing all your other stuff. That's an option if you want to take it, but you don't really get a lot of them, so I wouldn't say like it's definitely not more efficient to get keys from Nex than it is to just go get them from Wildy if you want keys right now.
And you'll probably end up wanting to spend those keys getting back into Nex, because it feels like Nex is the hardest KC to do, even with the extra KC you get per kill.
Awesome stuff. I'm just asking if we can skip UGC so we can try and get the rest of these questions done. Awesome. So the next question we have is from Mr. 2239. Would you consider a kill count system similar to Nex's for other God Wars generals? Currently, it doesn't make sense to grind out KC for Armor or Sora, since there are no low-level NPCs to kill like Zami or Bandos.
I would really like to do this. I wouldn't want to come in with a perspective of let's make getting KC trivial, but I do think getting KC should be better than killing the same 4 goblins over and over again, or the same 4 imps over and over again. Like, even if it's the same amount of time to get the essence, like the actually having the alternative to kill other stuff in the room just sounds more interesting.
Yeah.
If the thing's got 5 times as much health, it wouldn't necessarily be 5 times as much KC, but even if it just gave 2 or 3, at least it's an option, right?
Awesome. We have 2 questions from the same person, so lucky you, Millennium X3. The first one is, why isn't Cough more punishing in terms of HP damage as well, to force people to get rid of it instead of camping full Ancestral to bypass its effects?
It does drain prayer as well, so it's not like Ancestral completely negates it. I guess it could do damage as well, I just didn't think it was necessary.
It's also a bit punishing to do such a harsh mechanic when it wasn't a mechanic that you might have given yourself. It might have just been some person just running next to you. That's, in a mass, definitely not your fault. So I think it's okay as it is right now.
Cool. The next, we'll come back to his second question. The next one we have is from Darkhawk. What was the dev work like getting Nex to sprint? Will other NPCs be able to sprint going forward?
I do have that engine support now. I can't really comment on the work or how hard it was, because I didn't do it. That was more of an engine update. But it's a really, really big update for all future PVM that we can actually do NPC pathing as well as sprinting and crawling, technically. Blood Reapers are the first NPC to move less than 1 tile a tick. So really powerful, really interesting. We can actually have runes that aren't just squares all the time now, because they don't just get stuck on every little thing. Pathing is a huge update.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and you can imagine the implications for future bosses and stuff. There's so many interesting things we can do. And I know the team's been joking about, like, the Stranger and Desert Treasure. Like, if that thing can pathfind and sprint after you, like, that would be petrifying. I also found out the Stranger in Desert Treasure, Lenny found out and told me, that and players might know this, but the Stranger's max hit is your max hit. It's not its own.
Don't worry, max melee.
Whatever your max hit is. So if you're in,
that's
you're
scary.
In max melee.
Okay, well, you know, a little bit of insight there. Maybe change your tactics if you're doing Desert Treasure again. You know, just saying. The next question we have. Is there any potential to be able to pay someone to repair Torva from the damage piece and Bandos components rather than needing 90 smithing, much like you can for the corpse sigils and DFS?
Why? Is necessary? It's tradable. Is this an Iron Man concern? They don't want to get 90 smithing to use best in slot melee armor. I don't have sympathy. I'm sorry.
You got work.
I like. well, yeah. I like that. You know, to a degree, if I was doing DFS and Corpse Sigils again, probably would avoid this. I like that we have an ability to give smithing and perhaps other skills a use that is meaningful. The fact that, yeah, sure, it skips the cost, right? But if we can't redesign smithing that Runite isn't 99 to do the plate, at least we can add in other things like specialist stuff like Torva to give it a purpose. And I like that then 90 smithing is actually, if you're an Iron Man who isn't buying it, a really significant level to hit.
Yeah, so, you know, get good. That's what we're saying in a nutshell. The next question is, if you can make it short and snappy, how are the boss mechanics for Nex different from pre-EOC, RuneScape 2, or even RuneScape 3?
It's a hard question, Kieren. You might be better equipped to sum that up.
Well, there's lots of like small changes. I mean, to cut to the core of it, we don't entirely have every feature the RuneScape engine has. Things work slightly differently. So the way Nex is coded is actually different. We were very much paying attention to past behavior, but sometimes we would make, sometimes we'd acknowledge that there were small changes. Sometimes we made changes for better reasons, and that we looked at what was happening originally and just didn't like it, and some made tweaks. But Nex originally is still very different to the Nex in RuneScape 3, like mentioned in the question as well. I mean, just before EOC, this is like mid-2012, I think Nex was updated to even have to use prayers, deflect curses throughout the first 2 phases as well, the first 4 phases as well, so that you have to switch up between the melee and range and things. So we didn't want that. We wanted to stay truer to like sort of the 2011 edition, and it's not, it's recognizably similar to that, even though we've got a few tweaks. I think the way the prison works is slightly different in the ice phase, for instance. The way she jumps is slightly different. In the original, she never jumped next to you. She does now. So there's a few things like that we've tweaked up. But they were all sort of done with that mind of, we want to make Nex a good boss fight for old school. And obviously the biggest change of all is balancing, right? We couldn't just pump Nex in with the same stats and damage output and accuracy that she had in 2011 when players had summoning, overloads, all this stuff. We have other things, right? But the player isn't as powerful as they were in 2011, nor do they have the same staying power in terms of supplies. So we had to make it balanced differently than it was back then.
Awesome, thank you for that insight, Kieren. I feel like there might be a few players that didn't experience Nex at the time before Old School introduced her. So that's very insightful. The next question is, if the Ancient Godsword is considered for a buff, would you consider allowing its spec to overheal?
I think it's a bit too early to be talking about buffs when there are very few of those items in game and very few people using them. But I wouldn't be against it. SCAEs has also said that if this were to be done, then it shouldn't overheal in a combat dummy, and yeah, I agree with that, because it shouldn't give you just like a free 126 HP or maybe 125 HP. So yeah.
Oh, has anyone else seen that clip? I can't remember which Twitch streamer it was, but of someone getting like a 56 on the Godsword and then swapping to an AGS and getting like a 75-25 hit splat and just KOing something. It's just satisfying. Oh,
Yeah.
that weapon's really cool in PvP.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of streamers
I
start
just
to
hate
use
that
that
it's
method.
AGS.
It's AMGS. It's not AGS. It's AMGS.
Right, so we've got 3 more questions left. Hopefully we can just get through them. Yeah, we've got 5 minutes left. It's fine. It's fine. RS Captain Falcon says, were there any other nicknames being considered for Nex besides the 5th General?
Bird.
Big Bird.
I'm sure there were, but I don't know what they are. I mean, the first,
Chomp.
second, third, and fourth general were already taken, so.
We could have skipped 5th though and gone straight on to 6th, and maybe left a mystery one.
Yeah, the 5th one's
I'm not repeating that. Brew just whispered a very cheesy pun in my ear. I'm not repeating that on stream, I'm afraid. The next one is, where were the voice lines from the original Nex not added? It added so much to the feel of the boss fight. I think I can speak to the start of it. We don't have voice overs. That's a thing. So that's one thing. But the voice lines, I'm not sure. Has anyone got any clue?
Yeah, we just don't have the support to play like normal voice or audio files in general. So we don't really have this ability yet, unfortunately. I had a player message me about this, and they were saying how we technically already have it in the game because there's a music track of Verzik where she's like singing, but it's not actually singing, it's just like noise that kind of sounds like singing. But it's not like it's an actual recorded person singing. And it's very hard to replicate like a voice or a phrase or a word in what we have available to us.
Yeah. I think
This
Verzik is
also
more of
feels
a
like
tone
that's a
rather than
departure.
voice.
Yeah, it was basically some notes, right? This is the other thing, right? Like, I loved this. I'd have loved to have been able to do it, but I also have the back in my mind that it's kind of a departure from what Old School's audio is. Whether that's right to do as well. Do you do it as a one-off? Do we then try to do voice stuff in all future releases as well? Like, it does have other questions to think about. Like, is it Old School to have it? Probably not. Nex did have it. Which means, do you open the question and say, should Nex have it and nothing else? Is that alright? Maybe? They were cool. Yeah.
I mean, if anything goes from our event streams, I don't think any of us are going to be touching voice lines if that's the case. But and the final one, and I don't know if we'll be able to answer this because it is directed to the art team, but maybe someone can pitch in. Is there any discussion on the art design of Nex? Does the mod team think that the design can be improved, or are they happy with the current model?
This model is Nex. If we were going to change it and try and make an old school version of Nex, we could, theoretically. I don't think it needs to be done. I think it's fine. I don't think every boss needs to... Like, all of our new releases will be completely different, like the old school, or the new old school style. Is that a thing? The new old? Whatever. But you know what I mean. But this is effectively our old model, right? There's a lot of nostalgia that goes with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Arcane. That is it. That is all the next questions we have for today, and that just about sums it up. I'm going to go through the announcements again, and then we will wrap up the stream. So, exclamation mark game update. Nex is out, and in just the first day, a whopping 28k of you took down Nex. Very impressive. We've been reading your feedback since Nex was released, and have made some tweaks that are now live. So go and check out the full list of changes at the top of yesterday's news post and give us your feedback. And exclamation mark poll. There is a poll happening right now. Don't miss out on your chance to vote. Have your say on a plethora of content, including Tombs of a Mascot, Land of the Goblins, Group Iron Man, and more. Visit your nearest in-game poll booth or vote through the account settings menu. And just quickly before we finish, I've seen a couple of people mention about league stuff. There is league stuff coming. Keep an eye on socials tomorrow. You'll find out more. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, and that is it. Any final words from you, Arcane, Bruno, or Kieren, before we say goodbye?
Cough.
Good,
Oh,
good
great.
luck on your drops.
I mean, if it's not spread just yet. Oh no, there we go. There we go. Bruno's done the deed. That's it. All right. With that being said, have a wonderful evening, and we will see you in the next stream. Thank you very much.
Druid here. Don't you mean the next stream? I'm gonna hit the button now.